You know what a dead frozen soldier smells like? Not rot. No, rot needs warmth. He smells of iron and something faintly sweet, like overripe meat left too long in a freezer. In Stalingrad, that smell was everywhere. Soaked into the walls, ground into the concrete, into your greatcoat, into your hair. You woke up with it, fell asleep with it, ate with it. The first weeks it made you vomit. Then it stopped. That's probably the worst part, that it stopped. We drove into the city in September. We drove in as victors, riding on armor, cigarettes in our mouths, with that stupid self-confidence of men who hadn't yet been properly punched in the teeth. Behind us, France in 46 days, Poland in 3 weeks. We were the invincible army of the world, for God's sake, taking capitals like theater tickets. No line. Paula said 3 weeks, maybe a month. We'd take Stalingrad, reach the Volga, cut the oil artery, and that would be it. Russia would collapse. 3 weeks. I still laugh about it. Oh, though the laugh comes out wrong. The first thing you understood in Stalingrad, there was no city. There were ruins, and in the ruins lived Russians. We bombed the place ourselves. Richthofen dropped 1,000 tons in a single day in August, one day, and thought we were doing ourselves a favor. Idiots. We built the perfect fortress for the enemy and walked into it ourselves. A whole city has streets, corners, spatial logic. Ruins are a maze, and the Russians read that maze like their native language. Every slab of concrete was a firing position, every basement a shelter, every pipe in a factory hall a sniper's nest. You walked along what used to be a street, now just a 2-story pile of brick, and you had no idea behind which chunk of rubble a man with a scope was waiting. Snipers. Let's talk about snipers, because that's its own poem of pain. In the first days, we lost men in ways that made no sense. A column moving, crack, someone drops. From where? No idea. We'd hit the ground, wait, crawl, nothing. Heyday. An hour later, crack, another one. Then we figured it out. They were working from 50 meters, sometimes 30. That's not sniper distance, that's pistol distance. They were sitting inside the wall of the building next door, in a shell hole, shielded by debris, and they waited. Patiently, methodically, calmly. Unteroffizier Breitgaupt from my platoon raised his head over the parapet for exactly 1 second, just to see what was ahead. 1 second. He was a good soldier, cautious. 1 second cost him an eye and part of his skull. He lived 3 more days, unconscious. We started moving only at night, only crawling, and still we lost men. You know what we started doing? Putting helmets on bayonets and lifting them above cover, like some cheap First World War movie. Yes, because otherwise you couldn't tell where the shots were coming from. The helmet would be knocked off in 3 to 5 seconds, sometimes faster. From the angle of the hole, you could roughly judge the direction, roughly, because ricochets and ruins are their own mathematics. And I didn't care to study it. Zaitsev, Chekhov, Medvedev. We learned the names later, but we felt their work every day. They hunted officers. A German officer carried himself differently. Posture, gestures, binoculars. We took off our insignia. Then we stopped saluting in the street. Then we stopped addressing officers by rank out loud, only in whispers. In the end, we looked like a traveling circus, not the Wehrmacht. The cold. September was bearable. October wasn't. November hit so hard I still don't believe I survived it. -25 means your breath freezes and settles as frost on your scarf, if you have a scarf. I didn't. I had a summer greatcoat because by December we were supposed to be home, remember? So no winter uniforms were delivered. Brilliant logistics. We wrapped ourselves in whatever we found in the ruins. Curtains, rags, bandages. I found a woman's shawl, pink, with flowers, and wrapped it around my neck. I didn't care how it looked. I cared that my neck wasn't falling off. Feet are another story. By November, half the company's boots had turned stiff as wood. Leather hardens in the cold and stops bending. You put them on in the morning. They don't flex, don't mold to your foot. There's no warmth inside. You walk and feel your toes slowly stop being toes. First they hurt. That's still good. Then they stop hurting. That's bad. 3rd-degree frostbite looks like this. Toes black, hard. And when you try to pull off the boot, you pull it off together with part of your foot. In November, more men in our battalion were put out of action by frostbite than by bullets. You weren't fighting the enemy. You were fighting temperature, moisture, the wind off the Volga. It's a special wind there. It runs along the river and hits your face like an open freezer door, except the freezer is -35. You couldn't light fires. Snipers. Or rather you could, but only deep in a basement, with the exit sealed so the smoke wouldn't rise. We burned furniture, wooden beams, books. There were many books in the basements. Russians read a lot. That surprised us at first. One basement warmed 20 men. We sat pressed against each other like animals. Any squeamishness was gone by October. Body heat is body heat, no matter whose it is. The stench didn't matter anymore either. We hadn't washed since September. By December, that was normal. Now hand-to-hand fighting. That has to be said separately, and honestly, without pretty words. In close combat with the Russians, it was terrifying. Not the kind of fear that tickles your nerves. The kind that makes your legs actually give way, and you have to order yourself to move, because your body refuses. They fought. No, that's not right. They worked. Silently. Hard. No shouting. No theater. A German soldier is still a man with reflexes, with a sense of self-preservation. A Russian in hand-to-hand looked like a man who didn't have that instinct at all. He came straight through everything. Through pain. through death, and it threw you off balance. Once in October, we were clearing a shop floor at the Red October factory, a big hall. They used to make steel there. Huge cranes, metal structures, darkness, heat from shattered furnaces. We went in 8 men. Careful, along the walls, about the same number of Russians on the other side. They saw us about when we saw them, 30 meters, and someone shouted, "Ura!" and they ran. At us, straight at us. We fired, 2 went down, the rest kept running. I fired again, reloaded, and one of them was already a meter away. Big man, helmet, rifle butt raised. I took the butt to the shoulder, bad hit, glancing. Fell. Muller was screaming next to me. It lasted maybe 30 seconds, but in memory, it's 30 minutes. We survived. They pulled back. But after that, every time I heard Yura ahead of us, my stomach cramped. Literally, physically. That's not a metaphor. And about the Russians, because something needs to be said that we weren't allowed to say out loud. But everyone understood. Since 33, they hammered it into our heads. Barbarians, Asiatic horde, propaganda, brainwashing, all of it. Then you come to Stalingrad and see how that works in practice. Barbarians and illiterates don't build defensive systems that professional military engineers can't crack for months. A horde doesn't hold a single house with 25 men against a company of German infantry. And hold it. Truly, hold it. Pavlov's house on Penzenskaya Street, 25 men. A 4-story ruin, 2 months, under attack. We stormed it dozens of times, probably more, every time we fell back. You look at that building, then at the casualty list of your company, and you understand you don't believe a single word you were told about these people anymore. It was an unpleasant discovery, a late one. Their commanders, that's another subject. We were told Russian commanders were political appointees, incompetent, cowed, more afraid of Stalin than of losing a battle. Maybe in 41 that was true. In 41 nothing was right for them, but in 42 we ran into something else. Chuikov, commander of the 62nd Army, the man holding the city, he made decisions fast, and they worked. His hugging tactic, staying within 50 meters of us so our Air Force couldn't operate. That wasn't accident or luck. That was a man who found our weakness and drove into it like a knife. We lost air support. We lost proper artillery. We were left one-on-one, infantry against infantry, knife against knife, brick against brick. And there they were, better than us. Simply better. October, the assault on the tractor factory. It was the greatest madness I ever saw with my own eyes. 5 divisions, 400 guns per kilometer of front. I had never seen that density of fire before or after. The ground shook so violently that basement walls crumbled on their own. Dust everywhere. You breathed dust, saw dust, tasted dust, then silence, and the attack. We entered the factory, enormous, the size of a small city, and inside a completely different world began. Ceilings 20 meters high, cranes, girders, total darkness, because the glass in the roofs had long been blown out. Flashlights would give you away. You moved in the dark, by sound, by smell. And somewhere in that darkness, them. More than once we fired at each other point blank and only figured out who was who when we struck matches over the bodies. One workshop took 3 days to secure. You took a haul, and on the other side of the wall, the next one began. 3 weeks. The tractor factory. 3 weeks for a single factory. After the encirclement, after November 19th, when Romanenko and Chistyakov from the north and Tolbukin from the south closed the ring in 4 days, everything changed its quality. A different quality of fear, of cold, of hunger. Because before, there had at least been the theoretical possibility of breaking out. Now there was none. 300 kilometers of perimeter. And inside, us, Paulus from his basement in the department store, sent out orders about Fortress Stalingrad, and the Führer will not abandon us. Göring promised 500 tons of supplies a day by air. In reality, 94 tons arrived. 94 tons for 300,000 men. If divided fairly, 300 grams of food per man per day. But it wasn't divided fairly. Officers received more, and by December, an enlisted soldier had about 100 grams of bread a day. I am not exaggerating. 100 grams of bread, a piece the size of your fist. Once a day, there were no horses left by December. At first, they slaughtered the wounded ones, then the healthy ones. By January, there were no horses at all. We ate cats. There were many in the city, living in basements, hunting rats. Then, the cats were gone. We ate rats, not as a figure of speech. Literally. A rat had to be caught, which, in itself, was work for a starving man with frostbitten hands. Then skinned. Then somehow, cooked over a fire in a basement. There was almost no meat on it, but there was something. I ate rat. I'm not ashamed of that. I survived, others didn't. December, Christmas. On the night of the 25th, Bright Gaupt. Not the same Bright Gaupt. Another one, a namesake, a former choir singer from Munich, sang Stille Nacht in the basement. He had a good tenor. Outside, Soviet mortars worked methodically. Every 20 minutes, that was their tactic. Give you a pause so you could relax, then strike again. Breitgaupt sang. Then he fell silent. Then he said, "At home, my mother is baking Stalin now." No one answered. What could you say? Breitgaupt died in January of typhus. He never ate stolen that year. Typhus came in December and became another enemy, invisible, without trenches, without positions, without any way to fight it at all. There were no medicines from December on. The transport planes mostly carried ammunition, and sometimes schnapps, because someone in Berlin decided schnapps raised morale. It does, for 30 minutes, then it drops you below zero. The battalion doctor, a young man, 26 from Heidelberg, once said in my presence, in a flat voice as if reading a report, no medicines. 200 men in the infirmary, he alone performing operations without anesthesia. That is exactly how he said it, evenly, without inflection. He always spoke that way, evenly. I think it was the only way to keep working. Hysteria is a luxury. Hand-to-hand fighting in January was a different story, because by January, we had no strength left for proper close combat. We were all weak, hungry, frostbitten. The Russians were not in perfect condition either, to be fair. They paid for every meter as well, but they had food, winter clothing, and they had anger, alive, hot, unextinguished. In January, we looked more like ghosts than soldiers. We went into attack, if you could call it that, slowly, stumbling. Some fell and did not get up, not killed, just no strength to rise. They lay in the snow. Someone would come and drag them back, or wouldn't. It depended on whether the one who might help had the strength. At the end of January, after the Potomnik airfield was taken and supplies stopped completely, Feldwebel Kraus came up to me, a decent man, 35, from Stuttgart, 3 children. He showed me a sheet of paper, a Soviet leaflet dropped from an airplane, in German, promising hot food, medical care, proper treatment upon surrender. Kraus asked, Wecker, do you believe this? I said, I don't know. He said, I do. I don't care whether it's true or not. I have nothing left to lose. Kraus surrendered on January 28th. I saw him walking toward the Soviet positions with a white cloth on a stick, walking slowly, carefully, as if afraid to scare something away. They didn't shoot him. He made it. I don't know what became of him. On January 30th, Paulus was promoted to field marshal. The hint was unmistakable. German field marshals do not surrender. Paulus understood the hint and surrendered anyway. On the 31st, at 5:45 in the morning, threw officers with a white flag to the Soviet headquarters in the very department store where he had spent the last weeks. The first German field marshal in captivity. The whole world knew. Literally, the whole world. Radio worked everywhere. Berlin declared 4 days of mourning. 4 days of mourning. And for the first time in the war, Goebbels, a genius, turned the catastrophe into a call for total war. Well done, Joseph. Excellent use of material. When the Soviets came, I came out on the 28th. Our sector collapsed a little earlier. They didn't shout, didn't celebrate, didn't humiliate. They simply came. One of them, young, maybe 18, his arm bandaged, looked at me. I raised my hands. He nodded. Then he took out bread, black, sour, real bread, and gave me a piece, silently. No victor's words, no grand gesture, just gave it and moved on. It was the best bread of my life, and the worst humiliation of my life at the same time. Because that 18-year-old boy with a bandaged arm was a better soldier than I was, better than Paulus, better than all of us together with our invincible army and our 3 weeks to take the city. Of the 91,000 who surrendered, about 6,000 returned home. The rest died, mostly from what had already accumulated by the time of capture. Frostbite, starvation, typhus. They were already dead when they walked with their hands raised. Their bodies just kept moving out of inertia. Paulus returned in 53, wrote memoirs, explained himself. I have no interest in what he explained. That's it. 3 weeks promised. 5 months fought. We took the first floor of ruins in a month, paid a battalion for a workshop, thought they were barbarians. They turned out smarter, harder, more resilient than us, thought we were invincible. We ended up in a cauldron, thought we'd be home by Christmas. 6,000 returned. That's the price of 3 weeks.